Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Ages of Chaos. And it's going to keep coming back, this one, as long as Games Workshop keep pumping out books, basically, for the various Chaos forces. This one's going to keep coming back. Now, today, we're going to have a bit of a chat about Ritual of the Damned. No, we're not. That's the next one, actually, and that's been on my mind because that's about the Thousand Sons, and that's coming up. It's not out yet. We're actually going to be having a chat about Faith and Fury, one of the latest Psychic Awakening books. This one dealing with a fair few bits and pieces. There's a little bit. The Black Templars are back, which is rather cool. One of those Space Marine forces that has tended of late to get a little bit of short shrift. They tend to be left in the dust a little, which is kind of a shame because they are one of the more distinct Imperial Space Marine forces in the sense that they are tied directly to the Ecclesiarchy. They derive their imagery and their ethos from the Crusades, from Richard the Lionheart's forces. So they are crusading knights, essentially. They are zealots and fanatics. They actually believe, unlike most of the Space Marine chapters, they believe that the Emperor was a divine being. They actually believe he was a god. They are tied to the religious ideology and structure of the Ecclesiarchy, so they work alongside the likes of the ecclesiastical armed forces, the Sisters of Battle, the Adeptus Sororitas, etc. And not only does their panoply reflect that, they wear like robes and all that kind of thing, but also their modus operandi. They are very much a close combat force. They don't suffer witches. They do not like psychers or whatever. So it's nice to see them back again. They're an interesting force. They're one of the more ambiguous Space Marine forces in the sense that they are pretty much bad guys through and through. They are fanatics and zealots who will basically slaughter an entire imperial world if there's the merest hint of not just heresy, but of unprescribed thought. They're bastards. They are really, really nasty pieces of work, these guys. So it's nice to see them get a little bit of love. There's not just background here. There's also some a new rule set for them. Basically, the equivalent of one of the Space Marine supplements from the previous release of the Space Marine Codex, which is kind of nice. They've got some nifty new special rules and stratagems. You get rules for neophytes and that kind of thing. No psychic powers, obviously, because they suffer not the witch, so you don't get them. On the other side, we have the return of essentially the Chaos Space Marine legions that exist in the core Chaos Space Marine Codex, which is kind of fun. The background in Faith and Fury actually isn't all that much. It focuses primarily on the Word Bearers who are launching a kind of seditious assault on a shrine world. It's nothing much, to be perfectly honest. It doesn't really move the background on for any of these legions. It shows you what they're doing in this area of the universe. It shows you what their involvement is in the battle, but that's about it, really. There's nothing, for example, that shows you what Lorgar is doing or what Perturabo is doing, which is a grand shame. Really is. I would have liked to have known what their movements are, because we get hints of that in the core Chaos Space Marine Codex, so it would have been nice to see a little bit more on that. But what we do get is interesting. The Night Lords in particular get a lot to do. Heck of a lot to do. They really exemplify themselves as ultimate saboteurs in this background. They engage in their terror tactics. They undermine the enemy from afar rather than taking them on head on, which is exactly the opposite of how the Black Templars operate. So that's kind of fun. Always had a soft spot for the Night Lords. I don't know whether people remember, but way, way, way back in Second Ed, they were the poster boys for Chaos Space Marines. This was the first time the Night Lords had any real background. They did exist back in the ROC days, but they were loosely categorized as followers of Khorne back then. But we didn't have any real background on them. We didn't know anything about Conrad Kurtz, for example. Nothing about Nostromo. Nothing about how they operated, what their philosophies were. They were just a name. They weren't even a colour scheme. They were just a name, and that was it. It wasn't until the second Ed Chaos Space Marine Codex that they, alongside the Iron Warriors, Alpha Legion, Black Legion, and Word Bearers, were given a proper background. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting to see where they've evolved to at this point. and they get a lot. They were the poster children for Chaos way back in Second Ed. They were actually all of the miniatures, like the studio miniatures, the heavy metal miniatures, were painted in the Night Lord's panoply, and the pictures on the front of the boxes for the miniatures were all Night Lords. All of them were. Very strange. You would have thought the Black Legion, given that they are and were then the prime Chaos Space Marine Legion, the equivalent of the Ultramarines, but no, they were all Night Lords. Interesting. The big news for Chaos players in this book is that essentially this is the present day equivalent of Traitor's Hate. If you remember way back at the very end of 7th Ed, we had a book released called Traitor's Hate, and really all Traitor's Hate did was released supplement level rules for all of the individual Chaos Space Marine legions. That's what we've got here. So now, all of these legions have the equivalent, I suppose, of a Space Marine chapter in terms of their supplements. The only thing they don't have, which is a real shame, is the equivalent of a psychic power lore. That would have been nice to see. That would have been really good to see. I mean, can you imagine a dark geomancy or technomancy for the Iron Warriors, or an updated Malefic discipline for the Word Bearers? That would have been very nice. That said, what we do get is generally very good. You get warlord traits, you get relics, you get stratagems. There's lots of stuff to play with here, and some of them are bloody brilliant. I have to say, some of them actually put these legions back in the game, as it were. The clear winners are the Word Bearers and the Night Lords. The Word Bearers get some amazing stuff in this supplement, including some stratagems and some relics that affect psychers in such a way that you will automatically get psychic powers off. So if you can time that correctly at the right point in the game, you can do things like cast summoning spells that change the entire layout of the battlefield. It's very good indeed. The Night Lords get some excellent stuff. I mean, some flat out amazing stuff. It's all with the Night Lords. It's all to do with affecting the enemy and not you. It's not to do with buffing you. It's about affecting the enemy. Like there's a relic that allows you to affect the manner in which reserves arrive on the tabletop. So whatever miniature you give this relic to, it's like it's got a bubble of disruption around it, so reserves can't arrive within that bubble, which is brilliant. If you can position that character correctly, then you can absolutely disrupt the enemy. It's really good. It's very characterful, very flavoursome, and it just gives the Chaos Space Marine Legions a little bit of a kick. It gives them just a little bit of an update to have them compete with the current Space Marines. Now, I will say this, as characterful and as fun as these new stratagems and warlord traits and relics are, they in no way counter the current incarnation of the Imperial Space Marines. They do not bring Chaos Space Marines up to the same level, which is a real shame. There's also this weird thing whereby all of the other armies that have been updated in this way have been given the equivalent of the chapter trait system. So if you look back at the one that had the Phoenix Rising, it had the Eldari and the Drukhari in it, you had a system that allows you to create your own craft worlds and your own homunculi covens and so on and so forth. The Tyranids got a system that in Blood of Baal that allow them to create different broods and different hive fleets. You don't get that here. There isn't any system that allows you to create your renegade chapters, and that's really weird. That's actually really rather strange. It would have been nice to see that. My guess is that after they finished releasing the chapter supplements for the Imperial Space Marine Codex, my guess is that there's going to be a new Chaos Space Marine Codex to bring them up to date. Given that we've just had the Slaves to Darkness book in AOS, which has an updated Mark of Chaos system, which will work just as well in 40k, my guess is that we are going to be getting an updated Chaos Space Marine Codex relatively soon, reasonably soon, which is why we haven't got everything that we might have hoped for in this installment in Phoenix Rising, in Faith and Fury. Kind of a shame, but it's good, it's interesting, it's really interesting. It gives Chaos Space Marine players something new to play with. You can tailor your legions now. The Emperor's Children one is very good too. I'll always be a bit of a sucker for the Emperor's Children. We've got some lovely stuff that updates Noise Marines that makes them that little bit more deadly, which is really, really nice. My guess also is that we're also going to be seeing the Emperor's Children Codex before long, which again is why they haven't really updated this so much, because there's not much point really. I also suspect that's where the new Fabius Bile miniature will come in. So let's wait and see, Let's wait and see what happens. I mean, there are rumours floating around out there that there's going to be both Angron and Fulgrim released sometime this year, sometime in 2020. My guess is Fulgrim will be first and Angron towards the end of the year. So that will also mean, obviously, attendant codexes. That will obviously mean attendant codexes, so the Emperor's Children and the World Eaters. Let's see how that pans out. The next one is, as we mentioned earlier, Ritual of the Damned, which is going to have my beloved Thousand Sons in it. And we've already got rumours floating around of what's going on there. It sounds brilliant. It sounds really interesting. Cults of Sorciarius, the 9 cults, we can dedicate our sorcerers to them to get unlocked special abilities. That's fantastic. Can't wait to see that. Cannot wait. But when there are new developments, we will be back. So until next time, my dears, bye-bye!